Now, another historical event that influenced the need for mathematics reform was the Civil Rights Movement. Individuals who were concerned with equity questioned why all students did not receive the same education or did not have the equal access to challenging mathematics topics, and therefore it hindered these less underprivileged children to take college preparatory courses. Now remember, the Civil Rights Movement was this huge popular movement that African Americans fought for in order to have equal access to and opportunities for to have the same basic rights and privileges of being a U.S. citizen. And so this goes back in the 1950s and 1960s. And so therefore the children who were excluded from these challenging mathematics courses were children of color and of poverty. So what is the reform now in mathematics education as a result of the Civil Rights Movement? First, we need to set high expectations for all students. We need to believe that every student will and can learn, and that we set the standards, set the bar for the standards high. And we also need to challenge each student, not just teach them at the lowest level, but to have them think higher and to ask them higher level thinking questions and to challenge them in their thinking and their processes so that their skills can be advanced and they would be able to use those skills in many different ways. In the 1970s, the issue of gender equity was raised with the women's movement underway. The women were fighting for their rights also, just like the African Americans were in the Civil Rights Movement. The women were fighting for the same basic privileges and rights of those of the men. And in particular, the women were fighting to work outside the home. They wanted to possess intellectual and professional jobs. Females' PSAT and SAT mathematics scores were found lower than the scores of male students. This was possibly because the females took fewer math courses than males, and therefore due to their lack of mathematical knowledge and skills, the women were denied job opportunities. So what is the reform that occurred because of this? As a result of the gender equity and the women's movement, the push for women was to pursue mathematics and science courses and programs such as STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, in secondary schools and in higher education. And this is still prevalent today. And as a matter of fact, even elementary schools are now offering STEM courses and programs to in the intermediate grades. So in the 1970s, student-centered classrooms became the focus. This was not just about what the students needed to learn and what were the standards, but to look at the development of the child, to examine how children developed and grew and how they are able to process information. So teachers also used Piaget's cognitive development theory. Teachers looked at the descriptions of each stage, and there they formed lesson plans that aligned with how children learned, and therefore these lesson plans were appropriate, were age appropriate, and logical in order for students to succeed and to reach objectives in the mathematics education. At the end of the 1970s, a new movement came out. It was called the Back to the Basics movement. Society had the fear that students did not possess the necessary skills to be successful in the job industry. They felt that the textbooks held more arithmetic problems versus real life problems. Students were not actively solving word problems, being exposed to problems that they can face now inside and outside the classroom and later on in their daily lives as citizens. So the movement caused a new reform that was created by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which from here on we will refer to as NCTM. They developed an agenda for the 80s. And basically this was taking those basic skills that students were learning and making them into realistic problems so that students can experience actively how to do mathematics, such as mathematicians, scientists, engineers, architects, and others in the workplace. Students had the hands-on experiences so that they can understand the process, understand what skills they needed to solve these problems that they can use later in life. Did you know that the core curriculum that we have now in many of the states in the U.S. Actually first happened in 1989 by NCTM. This curriculum were the core set of expectations for students. It was topics that students needed to know, such as algebra, geometry, probability, and statistics. And so it included this core set of expectations for students, but it also included an extension of core materials for high school students who wanted to know, who wanted to focus more on the mathematics courses in college and also in careers where mathematics was emphasized and needed. And also there was, NCTM also had professional standards for teaching mathematics. These expectations were for teachers on professional development and teacher evaluation processes. And these included collaborative models, which is working together to understand and to identify the best practices to teach mathematics to the students, to help them get engaged, to help them improve and extend their skills and knowledge, and also to self-evaluate. It's very important for teachers to self-evaluate and reflect on their teaching methods, on their lesson plans, what lessons worked for the students, what needed to be improved. And we will talk more about professional standards later on in this course, and you will see that in the schools that you teach, there are opportunities for teachers to have professional development, whether in the school or within the school district. In 2001, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed by Congress. Congress wanted to see an increase of accountability from the states, school districts, and schools, stating that we needed to be held responsible, held accountable for what students learned, that we were teaching them what we needed to teach them, and that the students were getting the best possible education. In order to receive the funding from this government, and this funding is usually given to the poor and underperforming schools, the states had to show evidence of a continuous growth plan based on state standards. And an example of this growth plan is the Adequate Yearly Progress, or AYP, and you'll hear a lot of that in your schools in the U.S. And so the AYP looks at all across the subgroups, making sure that there is a growth in student understanding and students' test scores from the ethnicity, the socioeconomic status, students with special needs, and the English language learners. So this concludes the history of the mathematics reform in the U.S. There were a lot of changes throughout the 90 years, and it is important to understand the history in order to understand where how far education has come, especially in the mathematics field. We have encouraged more women to take more math courses, and also the push for women to pursue mathematics programs such as STEM, and also for minorities to take higher math courses, and not to hinder them from taking the college preparatory courses. And we must set high expectations for all students, and each student must be challenged. We must look at how the child grows and their learning development, so that we can provide age-appropriate lessons and allow them to explore and discuss and experiment, so that they can get those hands-on experiences to better understand math, better understand the world around us. And we want to make sure that our lessons and what we are teaching our students in math are real and relevant, and to make connections between what they're learning to the real world. And so this concludes our history of math reform, and we will discuss more about how we can make math real in our classrooms, and the use of different technological tools.